Last January, as most of us were blithely going about our lives, journalist Ethan Liu was visiting his aging grandfather in Beijing, China. What would follow was both unexpected and, it turns out, a vastly spreading global crisis. As he found his way back to Canada, Ethan Liu wrote Field Notes from a Pandemic, a journey through a world suspended. And he joins us now from the downtown core of the provincial capital with more. Ethan, so nice to meet you. How are you doing?
I am well. Thank you for having me, Steve.
Not at all. I want you to set this story up for us, if you would. Take us back to Beijing in January. When you got there, what did you find?
So the book begins right in the thick of it. And when I left Toronto, there was no pandemic. But while I was in the air, cut off from the world, that was when the epicenter city of Wuhan was sealed off. So I arrived into just a totally different world. And if you can picture this, there's a long barrier after the baggage claim exit. So there's a long line of people just leaning on the barrier. They are the friends and family waiting to receive the travelers. And they're all looking at the people coming out. And every single one of them was just in a mask. And this was before we all started wearing masks. So it looked very jarring. It was like a scene out of V for Vendetta, a sea of faceless faces. And to think just 14 hours ago, I entered the plane in a normal world and I just exited to plague. And the book details just how everything escalated from there.
You had one of those moments where you thought to yourself, Dorothy, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore, if I can steal a line from another good story. Well, all right, take us then you go to visit your grandfather, which was the point of the visit in the first place. How many times did you get in to see him before things changed?
Oh, just twice. And I felt very lucky that I was able to see him twice. And the first time, it wasn't even a real visit. It was half a visit. And so the reason for going to China was that he hadn't been in particularly good health. Throughout 2019, there came a time when my father told me in these exact words to prepare a dark suit. So despite everything, I feel lucky to have went to China when I did. Because while I was there on the second visit, I don't think I got even like a full hour in when I was literally kicked out of the residence, because that was when the residents started banning all the visitors. And while my grandfather has quite severe dementia, I feel there's a baser part of the brain that took in the raw elements of the pandemic. I'm sure he could feel the tension in people's voices, the somberness of the TV. He could feel the cold emptiness of the room. So I was holding his hand as I was getting ejected, and as I was letting go, he was just holding on with all the strength that he could muster.
That's very sweet, and I presume he didn't quite understand what was happening at that moment?
Not at all, and he's increasingly not verbal. There used to be a time when I think just a year ago he still had the strength to sit in a wheelchair, but he doesn't even have that now.
How ticked off were you that you had traveled halfway around the world for what you hoped would be, multiple visits to go see your grandfather, and then basically after one and a half, it's over?
I was pretty ticked off, but I tried to look on the bright side that I still managed to see him for what is quite likely the last time, because of all the travel restrictions now. I'm glad that I went there when I did.
Now, unlike the rest of us in the province of Ontario, who really didn't, I think, understand the magnitude of this thing till midway through March, you were right there at the beginning. So how does your understanding of this pandemic, because of that, and not at ground zero, but pretty close to ground zero as well, how does your understanding of this pandemic differ from the rest of us then, because you've experienced it right from the start?
It was definitely a jarring sight to see China back then. The virus spiraled forth from Wuhan really quickly, and very quickly the entire country went into lockdown. But I would say that back then I didn't think it was going to be like this, and I don't think many people thought that way. And even when I left China, I felt very relieved that that I was leaving it all behind. I did not expect the plague to just follow me. I would just look over my shoulder to see that it just dogging me like a shadow. And a great part of my book deals with how I feel there's a collective blind spot on the part of everyone, that back in the early days, I think if more was done back then, we would not be in this situation right now.
Well, I should follow up on that. How much confidence did you have in Chinese authorities to be able to sort of nip this thing in the bud?
Mm-hmm. That is a good question, because I think that there are lots of people saying that because of how authoritarian China is, it's able to clamp down so quickly, and therefore it's so efficient at stemming the spread of the virus. And people say that there is some merit to that system there, and there's a failure of democracy here. But also, when you look at it, the reason it had able to spread so much in China, it was also because of how authoritarian it is, because China itself admits this. At the beginning, local officials tried to cover the matter up. And why did they try to cover the matter up? It's because China punishes corruption really heavily. You can get the death penalty for corruption, and that is not where you can expect a fair day in court. And I'm sure the local officials, they were more scared. They were more afraid of the wrath of their bosses than the actual plague. And that cost the world dearly, because there's a study that shows that if China were to have acted quickly right from the start, it would have prevented 95% of all the infections.
Well, I mean, we know it in the West because of our relatively free media, but I wonder at what point you found out that the doctor that tried to blow the whistle on all of this and who was silenced by Chinese authorities and then who eventually went back to help and died of this virus, when did you find out about all of that?
Well, I had a VPN, so I was in China. I was still reading Western media, and honestly, I wasn't paying much attention to Chinese media, so I found out as when everyone else found out. But I don't think it made Chinese media for a really long time.
Yeah. I got to tell you, one of the most, one of the things from your book that is really going to stay with me are those signs that you saw as you were trying to, and you're smiling already because you know what I'm going to get to here. They really are very blunt in some of the language they use with the signs in the subway system, for example. And we're going to bring up a few photos here which show this. And maybe you can translate some of the language here. This is a virus warning, I gather, which reads, "Eliminate the poison." We'll go on and show some more that are even blunter than this, but how do people react when they see these, very, very stark messages from their government?
Mm-hmm. So a lot of this starkness, it has to do with how the Chinese language is. It's a very literal language. And so, when we say in English to disinfect, in Chinese, it literally means to just eliminate the poison. And lots of words all sound really harsh in Chinese. For example, marijuana, the word for marijuana in Chinese is really harsh. It's like big numbness. And so, yeah, I think definitely we probably view this to be quite funny, but it's a pretty normal saying in Chinese.
Well, there's another slogan here that it says, if today you go outside to run around, next year on your grave, growing grass will be found. Again, not the kind of message we'd hear from Doug Ford in the province of Ontario, but do you think these kinds of signs are effective?
Well, that's a good question. I think the signs are that they are a superficial thing, and they are funny, and it probably spreads widely because they are funny. But I think ultimately, what is effective, what is or isn't effective, is not so much the message you dress it up with, but really what is the action underlying it.
I know the first time I hopped on a subway here in Toronto and there was nobody on it, it was a very eerie experience. What was yours like when you saw that in Beijing?
Mm-hmm. So I before the pandemic, at least, I would go to China quite often, and I have never been able to get a seat on the Beijing subway. And I've taken it all sorts of different times, but that's just the way it is. It's super crowded, and I have never seen it so empty like that. And it was definitely jarring, and yeah, it was quite eerie in a way. There was like a nothingness in the air that also felt very heavy.
You feel like you're in a ghost town?
Yeah, it's like walking through a movie set. So afterward, I spent some time just walking in the Beijing downtown, and there was almost nobody there, and you can see that because it was snowing, and most places the snow was just an unblemished film.
Sheldon, I'm going to just ask our director, Sheldon Osmond. I think we got one more picture. Yes, there it is. There's Ethan at the airport. And Ethan, here you're leaving Beijing to go to Singapore, where your parents live. That's a fairly different looking mask from what we're used to seeing. What's going on there?
So that is a respiratory mask. So back then I didn't know this, but now I think it was in August the CDC of the US, they put out this directive that these masks, you actually shouldn't be wearing them because they protect you more so than other people, because the air goes in and out of it only goes in and out of the vent. And but for me it felt it was more comfortable than a surgical mask, because the air that I exhale doesn't go out the top to fog up the glasses. It was deemed a superior mask, and that was my uncle in Beijing. That was his last such mask, and he gave it to me. So I felt that was a good gesture.
Having said that, Ethan, as you left China, did you get the sense that I'm trying to stay one step ahead of this virus here? Did that occur to you?
Mm-hmm. So leaving China was definitely an experience, as I write in the book. There was absolute chaos and pandemonium at the airport. It was at the very beginning of February, and I was actually supposed to be in Hong Kong before Singapore, but I think just a day or two before I left, Hong Kong started quarantining all people who arrived from the mainland. And it hadn't taken effect yet, but all sorts of flights were canceled. And I only found out at the airport. And I think there were many others like me. They had flights to all sorts of places and they didn't know they were canceled. It was a long queue snaking outside the Air China counter, and there were people crying and just absolute chaos. Yeah.
Now, we've had lots of comparisons, of course, by experts to the Spanish flu of 100 years ago. But, I mean, let's go back 400 years to the Middle Ages and the bubonic plague that devastated United Kingdom. Compare and contrast, if you would. What's similar, what's different among these different global pandemics?
Mm-hmm. I think clearly biologically they're all different, but I think we should look past that. And what I find very interesting about these plagues, and what I write in the book, is that past pandemics, in a way, they have shaped the modern world. And you know, you hear this often that the word quarantine, it comes from quarantagioni, the Italian word for 40 days, but it goes beyond that. There used to be a time when medieval governments, they didn't really have a big role in their people's lives. All they did was, one, collect taxes, and two, if they went to war, they came and conscripted the men. But it was because of plagues that they started having a bigger role in their citizens' lives. When they started to take charge of their borders, when they started to haul people off for quarantine, when they started to track the health of their people. And all of this, they began as temporary health agencies. They eventually became permanent, and they temporarily guarded their borders. Eventually, that became permanent as well. So this idea of the state as an institution, it came from that, and also from the point of view of the citizen. They started to have a greater expectation for the role of the government in their lives. And we've seen that all throughout history. During the Plague of London, that was when classical liberalism was born. That was when they came about this idea that the that life is harsh and the state has an obligation to take care of the people. And I think from that we have this idea of the modern state. Typhoid and cholera in the 19th century, it gave birth to urban planning. And I think if we look in our past, we can definitely see the future and where we are going from this. We will definitely see a bigger role of the government in people's lives.
Let me follow up on what you just said by reading an excerpt from your book. Let's call this Pandemic Legacies. And Sheldon, if you would, let's bring this graphic up. Such is the power, you write, of a great plague. Typhoid supposedly smoothed the conquering path of certain conquistadors. Measles or smallpox is said to have contributed to the fall of the Roman Empire. The bubonic plague was speculated to have done the same to its successor, the Byzantine Empire. Infectious diseases throughout history, scholars, media, and historians say, have crushed revolutions, sparked socioeconomic reform, tipped the scales of wars, and reshaped how entire countries viewed religion. Beyond their death tolls, every plague has left a lasting legacy. We live in a world defined by past pandemics. That is a really fascinating observation, Ethan, and I wonder what you think the overwhelming legacy of this pandemic is going to be.
Mm-hmm. So I think with every crisis, the world gets remade, and with every crisis, the governmental arm grows bigger. And I think just as how the plagues of the past, they have redefined the way people view the role of the state. And I think this pandemic, it is going to have the same effect. And I think one great example, I think, is CERB, the federal government's income support. That was pretty unprecedented. And it had already sparked calls to make that permanent and for things like universal basic income. And if you look at the throne speech recently, that I think that was a significant leftward lurch by the liberals. And I think through all of this, we might have a greater expectation for the state in our lives, and possibly an evolution to a more progressive society.
Or conversely, should we look at the other side of the coin and ask you whether you think there are any governments or countries that will not survive this pandemic?
Mm-hmm. I think a great example, as I write in the book, is Nigeria. It hasn't been doing well before the pandemic. It's combating all sorts of strife within the country, all sorts of rebels. The central government does not have a lot of control. It's been battling the Boko Haram insurgency for a long time, and also its economy is so dependent on oil. I think. And oil is one of those things affected disproportionately by the pandemic. And so it hit the country at possibly the worst time. It's going broke at a time of such a significant crisis. And I think that there are many countries in the world like that, where the central government, it already doesn't have a lot of control. And now when you hit it with the plague, it's all going to become worse. But I would see that as temporary, because it is precisely that sort of chaos that make people crave bigger government. And so in those countries, developments, they will take probably a more twisted path than industrialized countries. But I think eventually they will go toward the same end.
You know, there have been plenty of people for many, many years who have been predicting the end of the ruling Communist Party in China for other reasons not related to a coronavirus pandemic. But now this one is here. Do you think that this could influence the hastening, shall we say, of the end of the Communist Party's rule of China?
Mm-hmm. I would actually argue the opposite. And yes, people have been saying, they've been writing about the collapse of the Communist Party, and for a long time. I think it got to a peak in like 2015, and it didn't really happen. But I think through this pandemic, China it's doing all it can to take advantage of it. As I write in the book, stepping up all sorts of disinformation campaigns. And it is also restarting its economy as others are shutting theirs down. And China was hit by this badly, but it was hit first and it recovered first. And sources on the ground, they say that they see this pandemic as an opportunity to leapfrog industrially. And on the world stage, you see China trying to eclipse the United States as the leader of the world, at least image-wise. There's been this great face mask diplomacy. China is giving all sorts of aid everywhere as the U.S. pulls back. And I know there's a saying about how you shouldn't look certain animals in the mouth when they're given to you as gifts, but the Trojans should have looked the horse in the mouth, or else, if they did that, they'll still be alive. And it's not to say that there are problems with the equipment China's been giving out, but it's very clearly using it as a PR moment to try to eclipse the United States, which, as you know, it has pulled funding from the WHO. And while it did that, China stepped right up.
Ethan, we're literally down to our last 30 seconds here, and I should just ask you about, we were doing okay for a while there. In the province of Ontario, we were down to 100 positive cases a week, and now we're going back up. We're at 1,500 this not too long ago, and everybody's worried about where this second wave is ultimately going to take us. Where do you see it going?
Mm-hmm. I think we see in this definitely a deficit of federal will, and I definitely think that there needs to be a national response to this. But we have 10 provinces, and health is a provincial jurisdiction, and everyone is doing something differently. And I know that Justin Trudeau, he is not Doug Ford's dad. He is not Scott Moe's dad. And there is a reason we decentralize our the power structure. There is a reason certain things are provincial jurisdictions. But when our system is so fragmented this way, I think the response is definitely lethargic. And I think without a coordinated national response, I think everything's going to get worse.
Well, you've had a very fascinating last 11 months of your life, and you chronicle it all in Field Notes from a Pandemic, a Journey Through a World Suspended. And we're glad that it's brought you, Ethan Liu, to our studio, virtually anyway, tonight here on TVO. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.